Hey everyone, it's Synth Designer back again with another sound design basics video. Today I wanted to give beginners an idea on how to use ADSR. Now ADSR stands for Attack, Decay, Sustain, and Release, and it's the most fundamental aspect, or one of the most fundamental aspects of sound design. If you don't have a good understanding of how to use ADSR, then you're never going to be able to create your own sounds effectively. In this video, I wanted to give you some examples of how ADSR works in the most basic of ways. I'll show you how it affects sounds in various contexts. So I'll show you some bass sounds, some pads, some keys sounds, and how you can create these sounds on your own. I'll also explain how ADSR affects your mix and some of the ways you can make sure the sounds you create are exactly what you want and they can fit in your mixes perfectly. So why don't we get started? So let's start with something simple. As you can see, this envelope here is essentially what's called the amp envelope. This controls the main sound effectively for this preset. So I'm not going to get into a discussion on envelopes too much. If you want to check that out, I have another video on that as well. But for now, I'm going to just show you how this sound is affected by the main envelope. As you can see, the attack is up slightly, but then the decay and sustain have basically not changed at all. So why don't we start with explaining how each one of these essentially works. The attack is, as you can see, a time-based setting. So this is the amount of time it takes for the sound to essentially get to full amplitude. So 29 milliseconds is pretty quick, but it's still not instant. And that's on purpose in this situation. So I wanted something brassy. Anything kind of brass that you think about is going to be slightly slower for the attack. So let's just hear the sound. As you can hear, it just has a slight delay to it. If I were to put the attack right at the bottom, as you can hear, there's that transient at the beginning. And that just means that there's kind of like a hit to it immediately. If I were to take this attack up, you can see it's now at almost 700 milliseconds, and that's how long it's taking for it to reach all the way up to full amplitude. Great thing about Serum is you can follow it along essentially as I hold the key. So you can see it's a little bit slower, but I wanted it just around here. I know it was a little bit, there we go. And it has just that slight delay to it, and which kind of gives it that kind of brass quality. When you blow into a brass instrument, it doesn't come out kind of like a punch. It kind of comes out a little bit slower, right? So that's the first fundamental aspect. So when you have the sustain up all the way, the decay is essentially not important because sustain keeps it at full amplitude when it's up all the way, right? You can see. Watch what happens when I turn the decay down. You can see the slope changing. So then the decay comes into play. So say I have the sustain all the way down. Now we have to play with the decay a little bit. You can see it comes down right away, or almost right away. If I were to have it all the way down, it's essentially just this blip. If I were to have it all the way up, well, it's decaying, but it's going to take 32 seconds for it to come all the way down. So as you can tell, maybe at this point, there is a way of shaping your sounds with these knobs here. So we're not going to touch release just yet, but think about plucks, for example. Now you have a plucky sound because you have the attack all the way down, you have a shorter decay and no sustain at all. This sound originally, though, was about here. I wanted that full sound to it, and that's provided by having a full sustain, and the decay really doesn't matter, and then having that bit of attack. The sustain is really what keeps that sound full. So you'll see in pads, for example, you'll want to keep the sustain up. You don't have to keep it up all the way, but you don't want it down too far. The decay will matter as well once you start messing around with the sustain, because say you have it halfway down here, you can hear it's sustaining at this level, and it's getting to this level in this amount of time. So say we had it to here. That's how quickly it gets to from that starting point down to the sustained level, right? Say we up the decay. So you can think about different ways of shaping these sounds just using these three knobs. Once you move the sustain down, the decay really is about shaping the types of sound you hear, right? Because the decay is giving you the kind of control of how long it takes the sound to reach that sustained point, right? And we'll see in a few minutes exactly how that works in different types of situations. I just wanted to kind of give you a brief overview quickly here. So real quickly here, the release is essentially how long it goes from the sustain point down to 0. So from here, let's take a look at it. If we increase it, you can see the release, is increasing. So it's also a time-based knob here. And it takes 1.29 seconds for it to go from this sustain point to nothing. So let's hold it. And you see it has that tail at the end. Let's just take it down to 0 and see what happens. Because this has reverb, so it does take some time. I'm going to turn the reverb off real quick. There. You can see it goes to absolutely nothing immediately. Let's just up it again. So it has that nice tail to it. So in certain situations, you'll find that you want that tail to it. Other times you may not at all, right? And for example, let's just go back to our pluck situation again. Right? The release is releasing a little bit. It doesn't have much because it goes quickly to the 0 point. So you might want that slight release at the end where it kind of holds that sound just at that very low amplitude. Other times you might not want it at all, right? You just want that quick pop to it. Right? So it's up to you. It depends on the situation. So hopefully that kind of gives you a general sense of how the ADSR works in the most basic of ways. Right now, I'm going to show you some examples in different presets on kind of the spectrum of ADSR that we can get. So let's take a look at this bass here. We have a kind of plucky bass you can see. It's really not too complicated. Don't worry too much about the wavetables right now. What we're going to be focusing is just purely on this, and don't worry about the other envelope. It kind of helps shape the sounds. You can check it out in my other envelope video, but let's focus on this for now. The good thing about Serum is you can look at it visually, but not every VST synthesizer is going to have this type of visual aspect. So you're really going to have to just rely on how you can work with just your ADSR knobs and your ears, right? So you can focus on the actual visual aspects just for the sake of learning, but don't get too caught up into it because you want to know how these knobs work on their own. Okay, so we have a short attack time. That means it's going to be probably a very plucky sound. We have a pretty medium decay, but no sustain. So when you see no sustain, that basically means it's going to probably be a plucky sound if the decay is low enough, right? And then the release is quite short as well. So there's not going to be kind of that sustained bit at the end, right? So let's just hear it. Was that kind of what you were picturing in your head before you heard it? Hopefully you kind of had an idea. Obviously, the wave shapes and all that are going to affect it as well. But I just wanted to kind of get you thinking about the sound that it's going to produce in a general sense through the ADSR. So it's got that nice pluck to it. Very quick attack that kind of gives us that punch that we want. Let's just play around. What if we were to take this attack up? Completely different, right? It gets rid of that initial attack. And that's an important part of the sound. What if we were to take this decay way up? Again, we have a completely different bass sound now. And think about it in your mix. I'm just going to put together a quick bass sound together. Okay, so I have this very, very quick pattern. I just wanted to show you how it works kind of in a mix. So I have the setting here on the kind of stock setting I had before. Let's just see how it plays. Okay, so it has that quick, nice pop to it. Let's just play it again and then see what happens when we turn up the decay. What's something you noticed when I turned up the decay or the sustain there? One thing to me is that it fills out more space. Think about that in a mix, right? If you have a bass that's supposed to be kind of a pluck to it, that gives room for other instruments to fill up that space. So a pad, for example, can fill up more space now, or any type of sustained organ sound, for example. However, if we turn up the sustain, that frequency or those frequencies are going to take up more room in the mix, right? It's not going to go from 0 to 100 and then back down to 0 again very quickly. What's going to happen is it's going to go 0 to 100 and then stay there longer, which means it's going to fill up more of that space in the mix. It's a little bit, maybe a little bit difficult to imagine it without all these other instruments, but I'll show you in a bit how that will work. I just wanted to get you kind of picturing that type of thing. But for now, let's move on to a different sound. Okay, so I have a pad here called Slow Swell. If you haven't already checked it out, go to synthdesigner.com and download Synthwave Essentials absolutely free. There's other types of presets on there as well. Everything on my website is absolutely free for Serum and for Vital as well. Any donations are appreciated, but not necessary. So this pad is called Slow Swell. Here's how it sounds. So what do we see here? We have a very slow attack, no sustain, but a slightly longer decay. So what I was trying to create with this sound was kind of a slow buildup and then a slow decay. I didn't want it holding at any point at that full amplitude. I really wanted it just to kind of come up and then come down, like a mountaintop essentially. What happens if we were to take this attack down? It's also a cool sound, but that's not what I was looking for. I wanted a slower sound. And in a mix, for example, you could imagine this in a variety of ways. Maybe it's kind of a background type of whooshing sound. Maybe it's for some sort of soundtrack for video games. The point is, I really wanted it to have that kind of character where it swells up and then kind of decays down. If we were to take the sustain all the way up, it holds at that point, which is nice, but as you can hear, there's a lot of that distortion. So I have the soft clip distortion, and for me, when you have a lot of distortion, you don't want that holding, right? It kind of gets a little bit screechy. Maybe you want that, but I didn't in this context. So I wanted it to go up and then decay down. So you can see I'm holding the keys the entire time. Yet the decay is doing all the work. It's giving us the shape at the end. The attack gives us the shape at the beginning and then decay at the end. Let's take a look at another sound now. Okay, so now we have a keys type of sound. And with keys, they're going to be a little bit different. It's kind of like a piano or e-piano, organ type of thing. They're all going to have a certain character to it that's built primarily on the ADSR. This particular one I really liked a lot. I think I did a full video on this particular key setting I have. Again, you can download for free at synthdesigner.com. Keys have a certain character that is built upon their ADSR, and the way to do it is essentially to have this kind of shape. What do you think this sounds like without hearing the sound? Let's take a look at it. It has a quick, short attack, which means we're going to get the sound quickly. The sustain and decay are a little bit different than the ones we've seen so far. So the sustain here is about halfway, as you can see, a little bit over halfway, sorry. The decay is halfway, and then the release has a long release to it, so there's going to be a long tail to it. When you think about holding a pedal on a piano, it has that kind of sustain to it, right? And that's a little bit what's going on. Yes, we can make a key sound that has that quick kind of pluck to it. In this situation, I wanted a little bit more of a rounded sound. So think about what this might sound like, and I'm about to play it for you. So it has that really nice, well, first of all, the tone is great. I really like this setting. But aside from the tone itself, it's more about how the sound is shaped. Let's play around with this and see the effects of moving the decay and sustain. Since the attack is there, we're not going to move that. But let's turn down the decay. What happens? It's not quite the same because we have turned it down, but the sustain is up, so it is allowing it to get to that top. As you can hear, there's one thing here. There's a click. Let's turn the decay back up. Now let's turn the sustain down and up. So let's turn the sustain down. It really doesn't have the same effect because it is quickly jumping from 100 to 0, right? And then back down again. When we have it all the way up, or at least partially up, sorry, it kind of gives us a different character to it. If we were to turn the decay up, you can hear it's just sustaining the sound, and that's no longer a key sound. You don't get that type of sustain when you're playing any types of keys. You can artificially, but I really wanted it to kind of mimic some piano quality to it. And that's what happens when you have these two decay and sustain knobs at that level. They're really playing an integral part of shaping the sound here. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is show you a couple situations where affecting your ADSR can absolutely make or break your mix. So right now, I'm going to show you a part of a song I'm working on, and I'm going to show you how pattern 1 in this instance, which is up here, and is a Serum preset of mine, how it can be affected just by affecting the ADSR. So I wanted kind of like a plucky piano type of thing. Let's just play the pattern. Here's how it sounds when it's kind of dialed in properly. As you can hear the individual kind of chords being played over and over. It's got that plucky sound to it. What if I were to ruin this with upping the sustain? One thing to me that it's doing is it's absolutely killing that pluckiness. It's muddying everything up. If you were to put it together into a context of the song, then it's really going to be more evident, I think. Right now, it's just on its own, but I'm going to play you a section of the song where there's more instrumentation, and then you can decide how it kind of fits within that. So obviously this is a work in progress, but you could hear when I up the sustain, all of a sudden a lot of space in the mix was being taken up by that piano. I didn't want that to happen, and that's why I have the sustain down. Hopefully you kind of got the sense of what was happening there, but all that is just from the ADSR. Having a good ADSR really shapes the sound and helps you create the sounds you want in context. Okay, for this last example, I have this ARP here that comes into the song. What we're going to be doing here is actually changing the ADSR on the envelope that I have affected. I'm not going to get into exactly the theory behind that, but an envelope has a huge effect on a sound as well, and the ADSR on an envelope can affect your sound as well. So let's just hear what it sounds like when it's properly set. As you can hear, it has that kind of brass sound, and that's created again by a slightly up attack. And then the decay is kind of down a little bit, and then the sustain is also down halfway, less than halfway here. Let's just see what happens when we up the decay. As you can hear, it really holds that sound longer, and we lose a lot of that pluckiness. So think about some of these things when you're mixing and you're creating your sounds. The ADSR plays a huge role in how things are going to sound in a mix and on their own. So think about both of those things together whenever you're creating those sounds. You're not going to always get it right. And the thing is, once you understand ADSR, you'll be able to make these adjustments on the fly. So hopefully this kind of gives you a better sense of how to use ADSR. Let me know down in the comments how you liked this video. Was it helpful? Was it not? Really like to know your opinion. And I'll see you next time.